The bullet missed Sarah Dalton's heart by 3 inches, burying itself in the wooden post behind her instead. And as she stumbled backward into the dusty street of Fort Bridger, Wyoming, she realized with absolute clarity that no one in this God-forsaken territory would lift a finger to save her. It was September 1876, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered buildings that lined the main thoroughfare. Sarah pressed her hand against her side where her brother's fist had connected just moments before, the familiar ache spreading through her ribs like wildfire. She had learned long ago that bruises hidden beneath layers of cotton and wool told no tales, but the gunshot that Samuel had fired in his drunken rage would bring questions she could not answer without sealing her own fate. Her brother stood on the porch of the saloon, swaying slightly as he shoved his pistol back into its holster. His eyes, bloodshot and wild, fixed on her with the hatred that had grown over the past 3 years since their parents died. The inheritance that should have been divided equally had been drunk away, gambled into nothing, and somehow in Samuel's twisted mind, it was all her fault. Sarah knew better than to meet his gaze directly. She picked herself up from the dirt, ignoring the stares of the townspeople who quickly looked away, unwilling to involve themselves in family business no matter how violent it became. She hurried down the street toward the boarding house, where she rented a small room with the meager wages she earned taking in mending and laundry. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the door, finally pushing it open and climbing the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor. Once inside her room, Sarah locked the door and sank onto the edge of the thin mattress, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was 22 years old, and she felt ancient. The weight of survival pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing, crushing and relentless. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Henderson moving about in the next room, humming some cheerful tune that seemed to mock Sarah's misery. She stood and moved to the small wash basin, splashing cool water on her face and wincing as her fingers brushed against the tender spot on her cheekbone. It would bruise by morning. They always did. Sarah had stopped believing in rescue a long time ago. When her father died from cholera, and her mother followed 6 months later from a broken heart and fever, she had hoped that Samuel would honor their parents' memory and treat her with the respect due a sister. Instead, he had become a monster, using her as a convenient target for every disappointment and failure in his life. The law would not help her. A man's authority over his family was absolute in this territory, and unless he killed her outright, no sheriff would intervene. She had tried to leave once, 2 years ago. She had saved every penny she could, hiding the coins in a small pouch sewn into the lining of her winter coat. But Samuel had discovered the money and beaten her so badly she could not walk for a week. He had told her then, in a voice devoid of any human warmth, that she would never escape him, that she belonged to him until he decided otherwise, that if she tried to run, he would find her and make her regret the day she was born. Sarah believed him. She moved to the window and looked out at the street below. Fort Bridger was not a large town, but it sat at an important crossroads for travelers heading to California, Oregon, and points west. The fort itself had been established decades earlier as a trading post, and though the military presence had waxed and waned over the years, the town had grown around it, serving the needs of pioneers, miners, cattlemen, and anyone else passing through the vast Wyoming territory. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that might have been beautiful if Sarah had the heart to appreciate them. She did not. Beauty felt like a luxury meant for other people, people whose lives were not defined by fear and pain and the constant calculation of survival. She prepared for bed mechanically, changing into her worn nightgown and braiding her dark hair. Tomorrow she would wake early and collect the mending that Mrs. Patterson had promised her. There was a rip in Mr. Garrett's Sunday coat that needed attention, and the Thompsons' eldest daughter required a new dress for the harvest dance. Sarah's stitches were small and even, her work reliable. It was the one thing she could control in a life that felt increasingly chaotic and dangerous. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound in the night made her start, wondering if Samuel would come pounding on her door, demanding money, or simply looking for someone to torment. But the night passed without incident, and when the first light of dawn crept through her window, Sarah rose and dressed with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned to make every moment count. She was carrying a basket of finished mending down the main street 2 days later when she first saw Isaac Kane. He was leading his horse toward the livery stable, a tall man with broad shoulders and a confident stride that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair and a face that was weathered but not unkind. He wore the practical clothing of a working cattleman, his boots dusty from the trail and his leather vest showing signs of hard use. Sarah would have walked right past him without a second glance, but at that moment, a dog ran into the street chasing a cat, and the horse shied nervously. Isaac spoke to the animal in a low, calm voice, his hand steady on the reins, and within seconds the horse had settled. It was such a small thing, that moment of gentle competence, but something about it caught Sarah's attention. She forced herself to look away and continue toward Mrs. Patterson's house. Men were dangerous, in her experience. Even the ones who seemed kind had the potential for violence, and she had no intention of learning whether this stranger was any different from her brother or the other men who had made it clear that a woman alone was fair game for harassment and worse. Mrs. Patterson was pleased with the mending and paid Sarah with a smile and a few extra pennies. The older woman had always been kind to her, though Sarah suspected she knew more about Samuel's treatment than she let on. There was a certain look in Mrs. Patterson's eyes sometimes, a mixture of pity and helplessness that Sarah found almost worse than outright indifference. As she walked back toward the boarding house, Sarah allowed herself a moment to imagine a different life. What would it be like to wake up without fear? To make plans beyond the next day or the next week? To believe that the future held something other than more of the same grinding existence? The thoughts were dangerous, she knew. Hope was a luxury she could not afford. Hope led to disappointment, and disappointment led to the kind of despair that made it hard to keep going. She was so lost in her thoughts that she did not hear Samuel approaching until he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave marks. Sarah gasped and tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "Where is it?" he demanded, his breath reeking of whiskey even though it was barely past noon. "Where is what?" Sarah kept her voice level, knowing that any sign of defiance would only make things worse. "The money you earned." "Hand it over." "I need it for my rent, Samuel. Mrs. Henderson said if I am late again she will put me out." His laugh was ugly. "Then you will come home where you belong, and I will not have to waste time tracking you down every time I need something." Home. The word was a mockery. Their parents' house had been sold to pay Samuel's debts, and he now lived in a room above the saloon, stumbling between the gaming tables and the bar with no thought for anything beyond his next drink or his next card game. "Please," Sarah said quietly, hating herself for begging but knowing it was sometimes the only way to avoid his fists. "I will give you half, but I need enough to pay my rent." Samuel's eyes narrowed, calculating. Finally, he released her arm with a shove that nearly sent her sprawling. "Half. And next time, I want it all the moment you earn it. Do you understand me?" Sarah nodded, fumbling in her pocket for the coins. She counted out half into his outstretched palm, her stomach sinking as she watched her hard-earned wages disappear into his pocket. He turned and walked away without another word, weaving slightly as he headed back toward the saloon. She stood in the middle of the street, her arm throbbing where his fingers had gripped her, and felt the familiar numbness spreading through her chest. This was her life. This was all it would ever be. The realization was not new, but it hit her with fresh force every time Samuel reinforced the bars of her prison. "Are you all right, miss?" Sarah spun around, her heart hammering. Isaac Kane stood a few feet away, his expression concerned. She had not heard him approach, too focused on her brothers retreating back. "I am fine," she said quickly, automatically. "Thank you for your concern. That man seemed to be bothering you. He is my brother." The words were meant to end the conversation. Family business was private business. Isaac's eyes flickered with understanding. "I see. My apologies for intruding." He touched the brim of his hat and started to move past her, but Sarah found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Are you new to Fort Bridger?" He paused and turned back, a slight smile touching his lips. "I am. Just arrived 2 days ago. I have been hired as foreman for the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north of here. The Reynolds place." "That is right. Do you know it?" "Everyone knows the Reynolds Ranch. It is one of the largest in the territory." Sarah was not sure why she was prolonging this conversation. Every instinct told her to walk away, to avoid any connection that might complicate her carefully maintained invisibility. "I am Isaac Kane," he said, introducing himself properly. "And you are Sarah Dalton." The name felt strange on her tongue, as though by speaking it to this stranger, she was revealing more than she intended. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Dalton. I hope Fort Bridger proves to be a welcoming town." "It is like most towns, I suppose. Some good people, some bad, and most just trying to get by." Isaac nodded slowly, and Sarah had the distinct impression that he understood more from her words than she had meant to convey. The moment stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not entirely awkward either. "I should go," Sarah said finally. "Good day, Mr. Kane." "Good day, Miss Dalton." She walked away quickly, her mind churning. There had been something in his eyes when he looked at her, something that made her feel visible in a way that was both frightening and oddly compelling. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. Isaac Kane was just another cowboy passing through, and she had no business letting him occupy even a moment of her thoughts. But over the next 2 weeks, Sarah found herself noticing Isaac more and more. He came into town regularly, running errands for the ranch or picking up supplies. Sometimes she would see him at the general store, other times at the blacksmith's or the feed and grain. He always nodded politely when their paths crossed, and occasionally they exchanged a few words about the weather or the state of the roads. Sarah learned from the town gossip that Isaac was from Colorado originally, that he had worked cattle since he was 15, and that Mr. Reynolds spoke highly of his abilities as a horseman and a manager of men. He was 26 years old, unmarried, and according to Mrs. Henderson, who seemed to know everything about everyone, he was considered quite the catch by the unmarried women in the territory. Sarah told herself that this information meant nothing to her. She had no interest in catching anyone, least of all a man who would eventually discover what a burden she was, and who would probably turn out to be no different from Samuel or any other man once the veneer of politeness wore thin. But then came the day that changed everything. It was late October, and the air had turned cold. Sarah was walking back from delivering a completed dress to the hotel, where one of the guests had needed alterations. The sun was setting, earlier now as winter approached, and she had stayed longer than intended, making sure every seam was perfect. Samuel had been in a particularly foul mood lately, losing heavily at cards and taking his frustrations out on anyone within reach. Sarah had learned to time her movements carefully, avoiding the streets when she knew he was most likely to be looking for her. But her careful planning failed her that evening. As she turned the corner onto the street where her boarding house stood, Samuel emerged from the alley between the buildings, his face twisted with rage. Sarah took an instinctive step backward, but he was faster than his drunken state suggested. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into the alley, his other hand drawn back to strike. "You thought you could hide from me," he snarled. "Thought you could keep your earnings to yourself." "I gave you everything," Sarah gasped, tears streaming down her face as much from the pain in her scalp as from fear. "I have nothing left." "Liar!" The blow caught her across the face, snapping her head to the side. Stars exploded in her vision. "What is going on here?" The voice was hard as iron, and Sarah felt Samuel's grip loosen slightly. Through her blurred vision, she saw Isaac Kane standing at the mouth of the alley, his stance wide and his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "This is none of your concern, Cowboy," Samuel spat. "This is my sister, and I will discipline her as I see fit. Let her go." Isaac's voice had not risen, but there was an edge to it that sent a chill down Sarah's spine even in her dazed state. "Or what? You will shoot me for dealing with my own family." Samuel laughed, but there was a note of uncertainty in it now. "Let her go and walk away. Right now." For a long moment, Samuel hesitated. Sarah could feel the tension in his body, the war between his rage and his instinct for self-preservation. Finally, he shoved her hard against the wall and released her. "This is not finished," he hissed at her before stalking past Isaac and out of the alley. Sarah slumped against the rough wood, her legs no longer willing to hold her weight. Isaac was at her side in an instant, his hands gentle as he helped her sit down properly on the ground. "Are you hurt? Can you stand?" "I will be fine," Sarah whispered, though she was not at all certain that was true. Her face was on fire and she could taste blood in her mouth. "You are not fine. Let me help you. You should not have interfered. He will only be worse now." Isaac knelt down so that he was at eye level with her. In the fading light, his face was serious and determined. "Miss Dalton, Sarah, I cannot stand by and watch a man beat a woman, sister or not. It is not in me to do nothing. You do not understand. He will not stop. He will never stop." The words came out broken, and Sarah hated the weakness in her voice, but she was so tired of pretending she had any control over her life. "Then we will find a way to make him stop." "There is no way." "The law will not help me. I have nowhere to go. I have tried everything and there is nothing. Nothing." Sarah was crying now, proper sobs that shook her whole body. She had not cried like this in years, had not allowed herself the luxury of breaking down, but something about Isaac's presence and his words about helping had shattered the dam she had built around her emotions. Isaac did not try to silence her or tell her everything would be fine. He simply stayed beside her, a solid presence in the gathering darkness, and when her sobs finally subsided into hiccuping gasps, he spoke quietly. "I have a proposition for you if you will hear it." Sarah wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "What kind of proposition? Marry me?" For a moment, Sarah was certain she had misheard. "What? Marry me?" Isaac repeated, his voice steady. "As your husband, I would have legal authority over you, not your brother. He could not touch you without answering to me. You would have a home at the ranch, protection, a future beyond this. You do not even know me." Sarah stared at him, wondering if he was insane or if she was hallucinating from the blow to her head. "I know enough. I know you are a hard worker. I know you have survived things that would break most people. I know you deserve better than what your brother is doing to you." He paused. And I know that I cannot walk away and leave you to this fate, not if there is something I can do to change it. Why would you do this? What do you get out of it?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "The truth, I have been looking for a wife, someone steady and practical to build a life with. The Reynolds have indicated that they plan to sell off a portion of their land in the next year or two, and I am in a position to buy it. I want to build something permanent, a ranch of my own, a family. But I am not a romantic man, Miss Dalton. I do not believe in love at first sight or any of those fairy tales. I believe in partnership, in two people working together toward a common goal. You are proposing a marriage of convenience. I suppose I am, but it would be a real marriage, legal and binding. I would expect you to run the household, to be a true wife in all respects. But I would also promise to treat you with respect and kindness, to never raise my hand to you or belittle you. I cannot promise you love, but I can promise you safety." Sarah's mind was reeling. This was insane. She barely knew this man. And yet, what alternative did she have? Continue living in fear until Samuel eventually beat her to death in one of his rages? Try to run away with no money and no prospects, hoping to outrun a vengeful brother across the vast territory? "I need time to think," she said finally. "I understand, but do not take too long. I cannot protect you unless you are my wife, and your brother will not forget tonight." Isaac helped her to her feet and insisted on walking her to the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson took one look at Sarah's battered face and pursed her lips in disapproval, though whether she disapproved of Sarah for getting beaten or the situation in general was unclear. That night, Sarah lay awake in her narrow bed, turning Isaac's proposal over in her mind. Everything she had learned about survival told her not to trust him, not to believe that any man could be what he claimed to be. And yet, he had stepped in when no one else would. He had offered her a way out when she had been convinced no such thing existed. She thought about what he had said, about partnership and building something together. It was not love, but perhaps love was overrated. Perhaps safety and respect were worth more than any ephemeral emotion that could fade or turn to resentment. By morning, Sarah had made her decision. She found Isaac at the general store, loading supplies into a wagon. When he saw her approaching, he set down the crate he was carrying and gave her his full attention. "I will marry you," Sarah said without preamble, "on the condition that you meant what you said about respect and kindness." "I meant every word. And you understand that I have nothing to bring to this marriage. No dowry, no property, nothing but the clothes I own and my ability to work. You bring yourself. That is enough." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Then yes, I will marry you, Mr. Kane." Isaac smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "Call me Isaac. If we are to be married, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Isaac," Sarah repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "When did you want to do this?" "As soon as possible." "The circuit judge will be in Fort Bridger day after tomorrow. We can apply for the license tomorrow and be married the day after." "That soon?" Sarah felt a flutter of panic. This was really happening. "Unless you would prefer to wait, but I will not lie to you, Sarah. I worry about what your brother might do in the meantime." "No, you are right. The sooner the better." Sarah glanced around the store, suddenly aware that people were watching them with interest. "Should we go somewhere to discuss the arrangements?" "Come out to the ranch with me today. You can see where you will be living, and we can talk properly." Sarah hesitated only a moment before nodding. She retrieved her few belongings from the boarding house, paying Mrs. Henderson the remainder of what she owed and ignoring the woman's avid curiosity. Then she climbed onto the wagon seat beside Isaac, and they set out north toward the Double R Ranch. The drive took about 2 hours, and Sarah spent most of it in silence, watching the landscape roll past. The Wyoming territory was beautiful in its stark way, all wide sky and rolling grassland punctuated by rocky outcroppings and the occasional stand of trees. The air was cold and clean, carrying the scent of sage and dry grass. Isaac did not press her to talk, seeming content with the quiet. Sarah appreciated that. She needed time to adjust to the enormity of what she was doing, the way her life was shifting from one reality to another in the space of a few short days. The Double R Ranch was impressive, with a large main house, several barns, corrals, and various outbuildings scattered across the property. Isaac explained that the ranch ran about 3,000 head of cattle across 20,000 acres, employing 15 men year-round and more during roundup and calving season. He took her to the foreman's house, a small but well-built structure about 100 yards from the main house. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a proper stove, a sitting room, and even glass windows instead of just shutters. "It is not large, but it is solid," Isaac said as he showed her around. "The Reynolds are good employers. They built this house for the foreman and his family 10 years ago." Sarah ran her hand over the smooth wood of the kitchen table. "It is beautiful. I have not lived anywhere this nice since my parents died. Then I am glad I can offer it to you." They sat at that table and talked for hours, discussing practicalities and expectations. Isaac explained his schedule, the demands of ranch work, the social obligations that would come with being the foreman's wife. Sarah talked about her skills in cooking, sewing, and household management. They approached it like a business negotiation, which in many ways it was, but there was also a growing sense of possibility between them. As the afternoon wore on and Isaac prepared to drive Sarah back to town, he paused by the wagon. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that I understand this is not a normal courtship. I will not rush you into anything physical. We can take our time with that aspect of marriage until you feel comfortable." Sarah felt her cheeks flush, but she appreciated his directness. "Thank you. That is kind of you. It is only right." The next day they applied for the marriage license at the courthouse. Samuel heard about it within hours, of course. Fort Bridger was too small for any secret to last long. Sarah was at the hotel, returning the payment for the alterations she had completed, when her brother found her. "You think you can escape me by marrying some drifter cowboy?" Samuel's face was mottled with rage. "I will contest it. I will tell them he forced you, that you are not in your right mind. You will do no such thing." Isaac's voice came from behind Samuel, making him spin around. "Miss Dalton is of age and sound mind. She has every right to marry whom she chooses. She is my sister, my responsibility. You have treated her like property, not family. Those days are over." Samuel's hand moved toward his gun, but Isaac was faster. In one smooth motion, he had drawn his weapon and had it pointed steadily at Samuel's chest. The few people on the street scattered, not wanting to be caught in gunfire. "Do not be a fool," Isaac said quietly. "You are drunk, and you would be dead before your gun cleared the holster. Walk away, Dalton. Your sister is no longer your concern." For a moment, Sarah thought Samuel would do something stupid. But survival instinct won out over rage, and he backed away slowly, his eyes poisonous. "This is not over," he spat, before turning and storming off toward the saloon. Sarah realized she was shaking. Isaac holstered his gun and placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "Are you all right?" "I think he would have killed me if you had not been here. But I am here. And after tomorrow you will be my wife, under my protection. He will not dare touch you again." Sarah wanted to believe him, but years of fear were not easily dismissed. Still, she nodded and tried to smile. The next day dawned cold and clear. Sarah wore the best dress she owned, a simple dark blue cotton that she had carefully mended and pressed. She had no flowers, no veil, no adornments beyond her mother's silver hair comb that she had managed to keep hidden from Samuel. Isaac met her at the courthouse wearing a clean shirt and his best vest. He had shaved and combed his hair, and Sarah thought he looked handsome in a rugged, understated way. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony in his chambers with his wife and clerk serving as witnesses. It was brief and businesslike, nothing like the romantic weddings Sarah had sometimes imagined as a young girl. But when Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and said, "I do," Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. This was real. She was married. She was Sarah Kane now, no longer alone and unprotected. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac leaned down and kissed her gently on the cheek. It was chaste and respectful, but Sarah felt her heart beat faster at even that slight contact. They had a quiet meal at the hotel restaurant, a celebration of sorts, and then Isaac drove his new wife out to the ranch as the sun was setting. Sarah looked back at Fort Bridger as they left, wondering if she would miss it. But there was nothing there for her now except bad memories and a brother who wished her harm. Her future, whatever it held, was ahead of her. That first night in the foreman's house, Isaac showed Sarah to the larger of the two bedrooms. "This is yours," he said. "I will take the smaller room." "Isaac, we are married. You do not need to do that. I know. But I meant what I said about not rushing you. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, you can tell me. Until then, I will be content to let you have your own space." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not born of sadness or fear. "Thank you," she whispered. Isaac smiled and squeezed her hand gently before retreating to his own room. Over the following weeks, Sarah settled into her new life with a mixture of trepidation and growing contentment. She woke early each morning to cook breakfast for Isaac before he headed out to manage the ranch hands. She spent her days cleaning, cooking, mending, and gradually making the house feel like a home. In the evenings, Isaac would return tired and dusty, and they would share a meal while he told her about his day. They were like polite strangers at first, carefully courteous and respectful. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that began to change. Sarah found herself smiling at Isaac's dry humor. She looked forward to his return each evening. She began to notice small things about him. The way he was always gentle with the animals, how he spoke to the ranch hands with respect regardless of their position, the careful way he hung up his hat each night so it would not get damaged. Isaac, for his part, seemed to appreciate everything Sarah did. He thanked her for meals, complimented her housekeeping, and showed genuine interest when she told him about the small improvements she was making to the house. He was patient and kind, never demanding, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. About a month after the wedding, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds invited them to Sunday dinner at the main house. It was Sarah's first real test as the foreman's wife, and she was nervous. But Mrs. Reynolds turned out to be a warm, practical woman in her 50s who immediately put Sarah at ease. "I am so glad Isaac finally found himself a wife," she said as she showed Sarah around her kitchen. "He is a good man, and he deserves to have someone to build a life with." "He has been very kind to me," Sarah said carefully. Mrs. Reynolds gave her a knowing look. "Isaac told us a bit about your situation with your brother. You are safe here, my dear. The Reynolds family does not tolerate that kind of behavior. If your brother causes any trouble, you let us know immediately." "Thank you, madam. That means more than I can say." As fall turned to winter, Sarah found her feelings for Isaac beginning to shift in ways she had not anticipated. It started small, a flutter in her chest when he smiled at her, a heightened awareness when he accidentally brushed against her in the kitchen, a longing that she did not quite understand when he said good night and retreated to his separate bedroom. She had never thought love could save her. In fact, she had stopped believing in love altogether. But this feeling growing inside her was something different than she had expected. It was not the passionate, overwhelming emotion she had read about in books. It was quieter than that, more solid. It was the warmth of knowing someone would keep their promises. It was the security of being valued and respected. It was the simple pleasure of sharing a life with someone who seemed to genuinely enjoy her company. One snowy evening in early December, Sarah made a decision. After dinner, as Isaac was preparing to retire to his room as usual, she reached out and caught his hand. "Isaac, wait." He turned back, his expression questioning. "I want you to stay with me tonight, in my room." Isaac's eyes searched her face. "Are you certain?" "I do not want you to feel pressured. I am certain. You have been patient and kind, and I trust you. I want to be a true wife to you." Something shifted in Isaac's expression, a warmth and tenderness that made Sarah's breath catch. "I want that too," he said softly. "More than I think I realized when I first proposed this arrangement." "What do you mean?" Isaac stepped closer and took both her hands in his. "I told you I was not a romantic man, that I did not believe in love at first sight, and that was true. But Sarah, over these past weeks, you have become the best part of my day. I find myself hurrying through work so I can get back to you. I think about you when I am out with the cattle. I lie awake at night wondering if you are comfortable, if you are happy, if you might someday care for me the way I have come to care for you. You care for me." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "More than care. I think I am falling in love with you, and I did not expect that. I thought this would be a practical partnership, and it is, but it is also so much more." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in years they were tears of happiness. "I never thought love could save me," she said. "I never thought I would feel safe enough to even want it. But Isaac, I think I am falling in love with you too." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Sarah could hear his heart beating steadily beneath her ear, and she felt something inside her unclench, some final wall crumbling away. "Mine will carry you every day," Isaac murmured into her hair. "You never have to be afraid again. My love will carry you through whatever comes." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms in the warm kitchen, and Sarah felt truly safe for the first time since her parents had died. This was not how she had imagined her life would unfold. But standing here with this good, steady man who had offered her protection and given her so much more, Sarah thought that perhaps the unexpected path was sometimes the best one. That night, Sarah and Isaac became husband and wife in truth as well as in law. Isaac was gentle and patient, mindful of Sarah's inexperience and the trauma she had endured. What might have been frightening became tender, and Sarah discovered that intimacy with someone you trusted was not something to be feared but rather something beautiful and binding. Afterward, lying in Isaac's arms in the darkness, Sarah felt a peace she had not known was possible. "I love you," she said, testing the words. They felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. "I love you too," Isaac replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret trusting me." Winter in Wyoming was harsh that year, with heavy snows and temperatures that plunged well below freezing. But inside the foreman's house, Sarah and Isaac created a warm haven. They grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's habits and preferences, developing the kind of shorthand that couples build over time. Sarah discovered that Isaac had a beautiful singing voice and would sometimes hum old trail songs while he worked around the house. Isaac learned that Sarah was a talented baker and that her apple pie was the best he had ever tasted. They developed evening rituals, Sarah reading aloud while Isaac carved small wooden figures, or playing checkers by the fire while snow piled up outside. In late January, Samuel tried one last time to cause trouble. He rode out to the ranch, drunk and belligerent, demanding to see his sister. Isaac met him at the property line with several of the ranch hands backing him up. "Sarah is my wife now," Isaac said coldly. "You have no claim on her. If you set foot on this property, I will have you arrested for trespassing. If you come near her in town, I will press charges for harassment. You need to understand that she is done with you." "She is my blood," Samuel shouted, "and you treated her worse than an animal. She owes you nothing. Now leave, before I stop being civil about this." Samuel looked at the assembled men, all of them armed and clearly loyal to their foreman, and seemed to finally grasp that he had lost. He turned his horse and rode away, cursing and ranting. Isaac watched until he was out of sight, then returned to the house where Sarah was waiting anxiously by the window. "Is he gone?" she asked. "He is gone, and I do not think he will be back. He is a bully and a coward, and bullies back down when faced with real opposition." Sarah threw her arms around her husband's neck. "I was so afraid he would hurt you." "I am not easy to hurt, sweetheart, and I have too much to live for now to let some drunken fool threaten what we have built." As winter gave way to spring, Sarah bloomed like the wildflowers that dotted the prairie. The constant fear that had shadowed her for years had lifted, and in its absence, she discovered a capacity for joy she had not known she possessed. She laughed more easily, smiled more often, and began to dream about the future instead of merely surviving the present. In April, Mr. Reynolds approached Isaac with a proposition. As he had mentioned might happen, the Reynolds were ready to sell off a section of their land. They offered Isaac first opportunity to purchase 1,000 acres in the southern portion of the ranch, along a stretch of good grazing land with a creek running through it. The price was fair, more than reasonable actually, and the Reynolds even offered to help Isaac secure a loan from the bank in town. Isaac and Sarah discussed it long into the night. It was a huge opportunity, but also a significant risk. They would be taking on debt and the responsibility of building their own operation from scratch. "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked. "I want to build something of our own, something we can pass on to our children someday. But it will be hard work, Sarah, harder than what we have now. We would be starting from nothing." "We started from nothing when we married," Sarah pointed out. "And look at what we have built. I believe in us, Isaac. I believe we can do this." Isaac smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Then let us take the leap together." They purchased the land in May, and the work of building their ranch began immediately. The Reynolds allowed Isaac to continue working as foreman while he got his own operation started, a generous arrangement that gave them financial stability during the transition. Sarah worked alongside Isaac whenever she could, helping to survey the land, plan where buildings would go, and dreaming about the house they would eventually build. The physical labor was demanding, but Sarah found it satisfying in a way her previous work had never been. This was not just survival. This was creation, building something that would last. In June, Sarah realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week before allowing herself to hope, and then another week after that before she told Isaac. "I think I am with child," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Isaac went very still. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. I have all the signs my mother described." A grin spread across Isaac's face, so wide and genuine that it made Sarah laugh. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her protests that he would make her dizzy. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Sarah, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy about it?" Sarah asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. This is everything I wanted when I imagined building a life out here. A wife I love, our own land, and now a child. You have given me the world. You gave it to me first, Sarah said softly. You saved me, Isaac. When I had nothing and no hope, you offered me everything. We saved each other, Isaac corrected. I was just going through the motions before you, doing my work and saving my money, but not really living. You showed me what it means to have something worth coming home to. They told the Reynolds the news the following Sunday, and Mrs. Reynolds immediately took Sarah under her wing, offering advice and promising to help with the birth when the time came. The other ranch wives welcomed Sarah into their circle with genuine warmth, and she found herself developing friendships for the first time in years. As summer progressed, and Sarah's pregnancy became visible, she found herself marveling at how much her life had changed in less than a year. She had gone from living in fear, alone and certain she had no future, to building a life with a man she loved deeply and carrying their child. It seemed impossible, like something out of a storybook rather than real life, but it was real. Every morning she woke up beside Isaac. Every evening they walked their land together discussing their plans. Every night they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms. All of it was gloriously, wonderfully real. In August, they broke ground on their house. It would be modest to start, just 4 rooms, but it was theirs. Isaac did much of the work himself with help from some of the ranch hands on their days off, and Sarah could see the pride in his eyes as the structure took shape. Our son will be born in this house, Isaac said one evening as they stood looking at the framed walls. Or our daughter, Sarah added with a smile. Or our daughter, Isaac agreed, wrapping an arm around her expanding waist. Either way, they will be loved beyond measure. Sarah leaned against her husband's solid warmth and thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had never thought love could save her. She had believed she was beyond saving, that her life was set on a path of suffering with no hope of escape. But Isaac had proven her wrong. His love had not just saved her, it had transformed her entire world. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, feeling her go quiet. "About how wrong I was. I told you that night in the alley that there was nothing anyone could do, that I was trapped forever. But you found a way. You offered me a partnership, and it became so much more. Mine will carry you every day." Isaac repeated the words he had spoken that first night they had confessed their love. "Through good times and hard times, through whatever comes. That is what love does, Sarah. It carries us when we cannot carry ourselves." As autumn arrived and the leaves began to turn, Sarah's pregnancy advanced. She was large and uncomfortable, but also radiantly happy. The house was finished in early October, and they moved their belongings from the foreman's cottage to their own home. It was a symbolic moment, the final step in establishing their independence. The new foreman and his wife moved into the cottage, and while Sarah would miss being so close to the main house and Mrs. Reynolds' easy friendship, she loved having a place that was entirely theirs. In November, with the first real snowfall of the season swirling outside, Sarah went into labor. Mrs. Reynolds came immediately, bringing the midwife from town and settling in to help. Isaac paced the small sitting room, nervous and anxious, while Sarah labored in their bedroom. It was a long night, painful and exhausting. But when dawn broke and Sarah finally gave birth, the sound of her baby's cry filled the house with a joy that eclipsed all the pain that had come before. "It is a boy, Mrs. Reynolds announced, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket and placing him in Sarah's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Sarah looked down at her son's tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He had a shock of dark hair and his father's strong features already evident in miniature. "Can I come in?" Isaac's voice came from the doorway, tentative and hopeful. "Come meet your son," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Isaac crossed the room in 3 strides and sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring at the bundle in Sarah's arms with wonder. "He is so small." "He is perfect," Sarah said. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Isaac asked, gently touching one tiny fist. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Sarah knew exactly what felt right. "Samuel Isaac Kane," she said softly. Isaac looked at her in surprise. "After your brother. Sarah, after everything he did to you, not after the man he became." "After the brother I had before our parents died, the one who used to make me laugh and taught me to skip stones. That Samuel is dead, maybe has been for years. But the name does not have to carry all that pain. We can make it mean something new, something better. Our son will never be like the man who bore that name. He will be loved and cherished, raised to be strong and kind like his father." Isaac's eyes were suspiciously bright. "And Isaac for the middle name. So he carries a piece of you, the man who saved us both." Sarah smiled. "Sam Kane." "I think it suits him." Over the next few weeks, they settled into the rhythms of parenthood. Sam was a good baby, healthy and alert, and both Sarah and Isaac were besotted with him. Isaac would hold his son for hours, rocking him gently and singing old trail songs in his deep voice. Sarah would watch them together and feel such overwhelming love that it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. Winter closed in hard that year, but inside their small house, the Kane family was warm and content. They had food in the pantry, wood for the fire, and most importantly, they had each other. One snowy evening in December, as they celebrated the first year of their marriage, Isaac pulled Sarah close while Sam slept peacefully in his cradle nearby. "You remember what you said that night in the alley?" he asked. "When I first suggested we marry, I said you did not even know me. And I said I knew enough. I am glad I trusted that instinct. You have been the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Kane." "You saved me," Sarah said simply. "I was drowning and you pulled me to safety." "We saved each other," Isaac insisted. "You gave me purpose, a reason to build something meaningful. Before you, I was just drifting through life. Now I have everything I ever wanted." They kissed gently, a kiss full of love and promise and the comfortable intimacy of 2 people who knew each other deeply. When they pulled apart, Sarah rested her head on Isaac's shoulder and looked around their home, at the cradle where their son slept, at the simple furniture they had built together, at the life they were creating day by day. She thought about the girl she had been a year ago, beaten down and hopeless, certain that her life would never be anything more than survival and suffering. That girl could never have imagined this happiness, could never have believed that love was real or that safety existed. But it did exist. It was here in this room, in the arms of a good man who had kept every promise he had made. Isaac's love had carried her from darkness into light, from despair into hope, from merely existing into truly living. "I love you," Sarah whispered, "more than I can ever express." "I love you too," Isaac replied, "every single day for the rest of our lives." And he meant it. They both did. As the years passed, the Kane ranch prospered. Isaac proved to be a skilled rancher, and Sarah managed their home with efficiency and grace. Sam grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around and learning about cattle and horses. In the spring of 1879, Sarah gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lily Marie. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's smile, and Sam was immediately devoted to his baby sister. Isaac walked around with a constant expression of pride and wonder that his family had grown. The ranch expanded as they saved money and carefully invested in more cattle, better stock, and improved facilities. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who reminded Isaac of himself at that age, looking for honest work and a chance to build something. Sarah often thought about how different her life might have been if Isaac had not stepped into that alley that October evening. She knew without a doubt that Samuel would have eventually killed her, whether intentionally or in one of his drunken rages. But Isaac had intervened when no one else would, had offered her an escape when she thought none existed. She saw Samuel occasionally in town, from a distance. He had aged badly, his face bloated from drink, his prospects dim. She felt pity for him sometimes, but never regret. The brother she had loved was long gone, and the man who remained had made his own choices. In the summer of 1880, Sarah learned she was expecting their 3rd child. Isaac joked that they would need to add onto the house soon if they kept expanding their family. But Sarah could see that he was delighted. He loved being a father, loved the noise and chaos of their growing household. This pregnancy was easier than the previous 2, and in February 1881, Sarah gave birth to twin boys. They named them Matthew and James, and Isaac laughed that he was thoroughly outnumbered now with 4 children and only Sarah on his side. The house did get expanded that summer, with 2 additional bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Sarah hung curtains she had sewn herself and filled the rooms with furniture Isaac built in his workshop. It was a far cry from the rough foreman's cottage where they had started, and even further from the tiny room in the Fort Bridger boarding house, where Sarah had once believed her life would end. By 1883, the Kane Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the region. Isaac's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle had spread, and they had built relationships with buyers as far away as Denver and Cheyenne. Sarah had become a respected figure in the community as well, known for her kindness and her willingness to help families in need. One afternoon in late summer, Sarah was working in her garden when she saw a rider approaching. As he got closer, she realized with a start that it was Reverend Thomas from Fort Bridger. He dismounted and removed his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Kane, I apologize for arriving unannounced." "It is no trouble, Reverend. Please come inside. I will get you something cold to drink." They sat in the kitchen, and Sarah could see that the Reverend was uncomfortable. "What brings you all the way out here?" she asked gently. "It is about your brother, Samuel. I am sorry to be the bearer of sad news, but he passed away 2 days ago." Sarah sat very still, processing this information. She had not spoken to Samuel in years, had deliberately avoided him on the rare occasions their paths might have crossed. What happened? His heart gave out. The doctor said years of drinking had weakened it. "He died in his sleep, which is a mercy, I suppose." "Did he have any final words, any requests?" The Reverend hesitated. "He did speak to me the day before he died. He was sober for once, seemed to know the end was near. He asked me to tell you that he was sorry. That he knew what he had done was unforgivable, but that he was sorry nonetheless." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks, though she was not entirely sure what she was crying for. The brother she had loved had been gone for years. This was just the final closing of a chapter that had ended long ago. "Thank you for telling me, Reverend. I appreciate you making the journey. There is one more thing. He left you his pocket watch, the one that belonged to your father. It is all he had of any value. The rest went to pay his debts." He pulled the familiar silver watch from his pocket and placed it on the table. Sarah picked it up, feeling the weight of memory in her palm. She had thought this watch was long since sold or gambled away. "Thank you," she said again. "I will give it to my son when he is older." After the Reverend left, Sarah sat for a long time holding the watch, When Isaac came in from the fields, she told him what had happened. He sat beside her and took her hand. "How do you feel?" he asked, sad. "Not for the man he became, but for the brother I lost long before he died. And grateful. Grateful that you saved me from that life, that you gave me this life instead. You saved yourself, Sarah. You had the courage to say yes when I offered you a way out. That took tremendous bravery." "We saved each other," Sarah said, echoing the words they had spoken many times over the years. That is what love does. As their children grew, Sarah and Isaac made sure to teach them about kindness, respect, and the importance of treating all people with dignity. They told age-appropriate versions of Sarah's story, wanting their children to understand that people could overcome hardship and build beautiful lives even from difficult beginnings. Sam, serious and thoughtful, took his role as oldest sibling seriously, watching over his younger brothers and sister with protective devotion. Lily was bright and creative, always drawing pictures or making up elaborate stories. The twins, Matthew and James, were inseparable and full of mischief, keeping Sarah on her toes. In 1885, the Reynolds retired and moved east to live with their daughter. The Double R Ranch was sold to a corporation, but the Kane Ranch was firmly established by then, no longer dependent on the larger operation. Isaac had achieved everything he had set out to do: his own land, his own cattle, a thriving business built through hard work and integrity. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Sarah with a beautiful new wagon, specially built with comfortable seats and painted a deep blue. "For family trips to town," he explained, "or anywhere else you want to go." Sarah ran her hand over the smooth wood, admiring the craftsmanship. "It is beautiful, but you know what the best gift you ever gave me was?" "What is that?" "Hope. When I had none, when I was certain my life would never be anything but pain and fear, you showed me that something better was possible. You offered me your love, and it carried me to a place I never thought I could reach." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close the way he had done countless times over the past decade. "Mine will carry you every day," he murmured, repeating the promise he had made so long ago. "For as long as we both live." "And mine will carry you," Sarah replied, "because that is what love is, carrying each other through whatever comes." They stood together in the afternoon sun, surrounded by the life they had built, and Sarah felt a contentment so deep and complete that it was almost overwhelming. She had been saved by love when she thought no salvation was possible. She had been carried by Isaac's devotion when she could not carry herself. And in return, she had given him a home, a family, and a love that had grown stronger with each passing year. The years continued to roll by, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's growth. Sam grew tall and strong, learning the cattle business from his father with keen intelligence and natural aptitude. Lily discovered a talent for healing and began apprenticing with the doctor in Fort Bridger when she was 14, her gentle manner perfect for the work. The twins, inseparable as ever, developed complementary skills that made them a perfect team in managing the horses. In 1890, Sam married a lovely young woman named Elizabeth, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. It was a joyous occasion, with the whole community gathering for the celebration. Sarah watched her eldest son pledge his love to his bride and thought about how different his life had started compared to hers. He had grown up knowing he was loved, knowing he was safe. That was perhaps the greatest gift she and Isaac had given their children: the security to believe in love, to trust in the goodness of others, to build their lives on a foundation of faith and hope rather than fear. 2 years later, Elizabeth gave birth to Sarah and Isaac's first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl they named Rose. Sarah held her granddaughter in her arms and marveled at the passage of time, at how one moment of courage, 17 years earlier, had led to this moment, to this new life that carried her blood and Isaac's forward into the future. As Sarah moved into her 40s, she looked back on her life with wonder and gratitude. The scared, broken young woman who had stumbled through the streets of Fort Bridger was barely recognizable now. In her place was a confident rancher's wife, a loving mother, a respected member of the community, and most importantly, a woman who knew she was deeply loved. She and Isaac had built more than a ranch over these years. They had built a legacy of love, a family that knew how to face hardship with courage and celebrate joy with open hearts. They had proven that two people who started with nothing but a practical arrangement could create something beautiful and lasting. On quiet evenings, Sarah and Isaac would sit on their porch watching the sunset, their children's laughter floating from the house behind them, and talk about their life together. They reminisced about those early days, about the fear and uncertainty and the gradual blossoming of their love. They talked about the children and the grandchildren, about the ranch and their dreams for its future. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked one evening. "Marrying me on such short acquaintance, taking such a risk?" Sarah looked at him, at the man who had aged alongside her, whose face was more weathered now but whose eyes still held that same gentle strength that had first drawn her to trust him. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me everything, Isaac. You gave me life when I was merely existing. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me safety when I believed I would die afraid and alone. Every good thing in my life came from that moment when you stepped into the alley and offered me a way out." "We built it together," Isaac said, as he always did. "Your courage, your strength, your capacity for love despite everything you had endured. Those things were all you, Sarah. I just gave you a safe place to let them flourish." "Mine carries you every day," Sarah said softly, deliberately changing his words slightly. "My love for you, Isaac. It carries me through every challenge, every joy, every ordinary moment. You told me once that your love would carry me, and it has. But mine carries you too. That is what makes us work. We carry each other." Isaac reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of decades together. "I think that is the secret," he said thoughtfully. "Not just love, but the willingness to carry each other's burdens, to share the weight of life. Too many people think love is about grand gestures and passion, but it is really about this: sitting together at the end of the day, knowing you have a partner who will face whatever comes alongside you." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah leaned her head against Isaac's shoulder and closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. The horses in the pasture, the distant lowing of cattle, the wind moving through the grass, the murmur of voices from inside where their children were cleaning up after supper. This was her life, built from ashes and faith and the extraordinary love of an ordinary cowboy who had refused to walk away when she needed help. In 1895, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a large party. Friends and family came from all over the territory, filling the ranch with laughter and music. Sam and Elizabeth were there with little Rose, now 3 years old, and their newborn son, Isaac Jr. Lily had finished her medical training and returned to practice in Fort Bridger, engaged to be married to a young lawyer who adored her. The twins, both 18 now, were courting sisters from a ranch to the north and seemed likely to make it a double wedding soon. As Sarah looked around at the gathering, at all the people whose lives had been touched by the love she and Isaac shared, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was more than she had ever dreamed possible in those dark days before Isaac had entered her life. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left and the children had retired, Sarah and Isaac took a walk across their land under the light of a full moon. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying each other's presence and the beauty of the night. 20 years, Isaac said eventually. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes I can hardly remember being that frightened girl in Fort Bridger. Other times it feels like yesterday. You were never just a frightened girl, Isaac said firmly. You were strong and brave, even when you did not feel it. You survived things that would have destroyed someone weaker. I saw that strength in you from the beginning. It was one of the things that made me want to help you. You saw something in me I could not see in myself, Sarah acknowledged. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in anything. They reached the top of a small rise that overlooked their ranch. The house was visible in the distance, lights glowing warmly in the windows. Beyond it were the barns and corrals, the pastures spreading out in all directions, all of it theirs, built through years of hard work and mutual devotion. I want you to know something, Isaac said, turning to face Sarah and taking both her hands in his. These 20 years with you have been the best of my life. Every morning I wake up grateful that you said yes when I proposed that insane arrangement. Grateful that you trusted me enough to take that leap. Grateful that you opened your heart to me and let our partnership become love. Isaac. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me physical safety, yes, but you also gave me back my faith in humanity, my ability to trust, my capacity for joy. You showed me what real love looks like, and it has been the foundation of everything good in my life. Mine will carry you every day, Isaac said, the words that had become their private promise to each other. Until the day I die, my love will carry you through whatever comes. And mine will carry you, Sarah replied, now and always. They kissed under the moonlight, a kiss that held 20 years of shared history, of challenges overcome and joys celebrated. When they finally walked back to the house hand in hand, Sarah felt completely at peace. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, carrying each other as they always had. The years that followed brought more changes. Sam took over more of the ranch operations as Isaac gradually stepped back, content to advise rather than manage. Lily married her lawyer and opened a medical practice in Cheyenne, though she visited often. The twins did indeed marry the sisters in a double wedding that was the social event of the season, and both couples settled on portions of the Kane land that Isaac and Sarah gifted them. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with energy and laughter. Sarah loved being a grandmother, loved having little ones around again to spoil and teach and simply enjoy. Isaac was wonderful with the grandchildren, patient and playful in ways that made Sarah fall in love with him all over again. In 1902, Isaac and Sarah celebrated their 27th anniversary quietly, just the two of them. Their children had offered to host a party, but they had declined, preferring the intimacy of an evening alone together. They had dinner at the hotel in Fort Bridger, the same place where they had shared their first meal as husband and wife, and then walked through the town as the sun set. "Do you remember that day I saw you after Samuel had taken your money?" Isaac asked as they passed the spot where that encounter had occurred. "I remember. I thought you were just being polite, that you would forget about me the moment you walked away. I thought about you constantly after that. Wondered if you were all right, if your brother was treating you well. When I saw him attacking you in that alley, I was angry in a way I had never been before. The thought of someone hurting you made me want to do violence, which was unlike me." "My hero," Sarah said with a gentle smile. "Riding in to save the damsel in distress. More like a cowboy who could not stand by and do nothing. Isaac corrected. "But I am glad I was there. Glad I had the courage to offer you an alternative, even if it was an unconventional one." They walked past the old boarding house where Sarah had lived. It looked shabbier now, in need of repairs that the owner could apparently not afford. Sarah remembered her tiny room, the thin walls, the constant fear. It seemed like something from another lifetime. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had not proposed marriage," Sarah mused. "If you had just stopped the attack and then walked away. I like to think you would have found another way out eventually. You are too strong to have let Samuel destroy you forever." "Maybe. But I was running out of options, Isaac. I truly believed I was trapped. Your proposal was not just a way out, it was the only way out I could see." "Then I am doubly glad I made it." Isaac squeezed her hand. "Because that choice led to all of this. Our life, our children, everything we have built. It all started with that one moment of courage, both yours and mine." As they made their way back to where they had left the wagon, Sarah reflected on the truth of his words. Life really did hinge on moments of courage, on choices made in the face of fear or uncertainty. She had been brave enough to say yes to a virtual stranger's proposal. Isaac had been brave enough to make it. And from that foundation of mutual courage and growing trust, they had built a love that had lasted nearly 3 decades and showed no signs of diminishing. Into their 50s and then their 60s, Sarah and Isaac aged gracefully together. They remained active and engaged with the ranch and their family, though they relied more and more on Sam and his brothers to handle the physical demands of the work. They became the wise elders of the family, the ones everyone turned to for advice or comfort or simply the reassurance of their steady presence. Tragedy touched their lives occasionally, as it does all families. They lost one of the twins, Matthew, to pneumonia in the winter of 1908. The grief was profound, but they bore it together, supporting each other and their surviving children through the terrible loss. James was devastated by the death of his twin, but with Sarah and Isaac's help, he found a way to carry on, honoring his brother's memory by living fully. But there was far more joy than sorrow over the years. They celebrated weddings and births, successes and achievements. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin having children of their own, making Sarah and Isaac great-grandparents. The ranch continued to prosper under Sam's management, and the Kane name became synonymous with integrity and quality throughout the region. In 1916, on their 40th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were dozens of people present. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and friends accumulated over a lifetime. Sarah and Isaac sat in places of honor, accepting toasts and well wishes with grace and humility. Sam gave a speech thanking his parents for the example they had set, for showing him and his siblings what real love looked like. "My father saved my mother," he said, "but more importantly, they saved each other. They built a partnership based on respect and trust, and it grew into a love that has inspired everyone who knows them. That is the legacy they have given us, and it is worth more than all the land or cattle or money in the world." Sarah cried happy tears and held Isaac's hand tightly as their family celebrated around them. At 62 years old, she was still in good health, still active and engaged with life. Isaac, at 66, had slowed down some but remained the steady, dependable man he had always been. That evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Sarah and Isaac sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the decades. 40 years, Sarah said softly. "It seems impossible." "The best 40 years of my life," Isaac replied. "I meant every word I said that night I proposed to you, Sarah. I promised you safety and respect, and I hope I have delivered on that. You have given me so much more than that. You have given me everything that matters: love, family, purpose, joy. You took a broken woman and helped her become whole again. You were never broken. Wounded, yes. Scared, yes. But your core was always strong and true. I just gave you a safe place to heal and grow. Sarah turned to look at her husband, really look at him in the lamplight spilling from the windows. His hair was silver now, his face deeply lined by years of sun and wind and laughter. But his eyes were still kind, still holding that gentle strength that had made her trust him all those years ago. "I never thought love could save me," she said, echoing the realization she had come to so long ago. "I thought I was beyond saving, that my life was set in stone and there was nothing to be done about it. But you proved me wrong. Your love saved me, Isaac. It carried me from darkness into light." "And yours carried me," Isaac said. "I was drifting before you, just going through the motions. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting. We saved each other, Sarah. That is what makes us work. We carry each other's burdens, share each other's joys, face everything together." "Mine will carry you every day," Sarah said, the words that had become their eternal promise. "For whatever time we have left, my love will carry you. And mine will carry you," Isaac replied. "Now and always, until the end of our days." They sat together in the peaceful night, surrounded by the evidence of their life's work. The ranch spread out around them, generations of their family sleeping under their roof or in homes nearby. It was a legacy built on love, on two people who had taken a chance on each other and created something beautiful and lasting. Sarah thought back to that terrified young woman in the alley, certain she would die alone and afraid. She could hardly recognize that person now. The life she had lived since then had been richer and fuller than she could have ever imagined. And it had all started because one cowboy had been brave enough to step in and offer help, and one woman had been brave enough to accept it. Love had saved her. Not the passionate, overwhelming love of romantic stories, but the steady, dependable love of a partnership built on trust and respect. It was the kind of love that lasted, that weathered storms and celebrated sunshine, that grew deeper with every passing year. Isaac's love had carried her every day for 40 years, and her love had carried him. Together, they had built a life that honored that mutual devotion, a family that understood the value of partnership and commitment. As they finally rose to head inside for the night, Sarah paused to take one last look at the stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky. The same stars had been shining that first night they had become husband and wife, when she had been so uncertain about the future. Now, 40 years later, she was more certain than ever that saying yes to Isaac Kane had been the best decision of her life. They went inside together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever remaining years they had with the same love and commitment that had sustained them for 4 decades. And as Sarah drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the cowboy who had refused to walk away, for the love that had saved her, and for every day of the beautiful life they had built together. The story of Sarah and Isaac Kane would be told and retold in their family for generations to come, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the choice to carry each other through whatever life brings. It was not a perfect story, but it was real and true and beautiful in all the ways that mattered. She had never thought love could save her, but it had. And in saving her, it had created a legacy that would endure long after both of them were gone. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes to hope, even when you are certain none exists.